there! Welcome to Amy's Book Nook. I thought today that I would recommend some historical fiction novels. I find that I'm up for a little bit of escapism, and going back in time can sometimes help with that. So I thought I'd just do a bit of historical fiction recommending. Anyway, so a couple of books that have been really popular in the past years for historical fiction have been Jessie Burton, The Miniaturist. As you can see from the reprinted cover, it was made into a BBC program. It was originally published in 2014. It was set in Amsterdam in the 1680s, and we follow a young girl. I think she's 18, and she's been married to an older, wealthy merchant, and their wedding gift is a miniature construction of the house that they live in. And Nicola is our protagonist, the 18-year-old wife, and she learns sort of the secrets of the house through the miniatures. So the question of who the miniaturist is, what they know, how they know what they know, has a sort of gothic-y element to it. You wonder if there is sort of a supernatural element involved. So that is fun, on a little bit of spookiness for that one. Just a few years later, in 2016, Jessie Burton came out with The Muse. And this one is set partly in 1930s Spain, right around the Spanish Civil War, and then 30 years later in London, in an art gallery. So one of the characters during the Spanish Civil War is an artist, and we learn more about them, and then the question is about that artist's paintings being rediscovered and put in a gallery in the 60s. But there's more to it than that. The question of who the artist is comes into play, and I think I liked this one better than The Miniaturist. Maybe because it handles two time periods really well. Maybe it's because the discussion of the politics around war I thought were really interesting, but it was definitely my preference. I feel like questions of family and memory and representation are at the fore of The Muse, and I really enjoyed that one. So there's not really a gothic-y element to that one. If you're into the gothic-y sort of ready to be scared component of historical fiction, then I have 3 recommendations for you. The first is Doll Factory. Sorry, this is a proof copy, so it's not precisely what the cover looks like. But The Doll Factory by Elizabeth Macneal is set in 1850 in London, so right around the Great Exhibition. And we have 2 main characters. A woman who paints dolls but wants to be a painter, and then a group of known male painters, and she sort of becomes their muse. And then the other character is a taxidermist who creates objects to go into these like pre-Raphaelite paintings, and their lives intertwine, and it is very spooky, and it is really well done, and I think you get a good sense of the 1850s and the social and economic disparity that is there at the time, and the character development's really good. It's a good spooky read. Another one is Wakenhyrst by Michelle Paver. This came out just last year, and it's set in Edwardian Suffolk, so early 1900s. There's an old church, and they're getting ready to rebuild or something, but they notice that there is a painting on the wall of the church, and this painting stirs up memories, and it stirs up references to, I think it was a medieval saint and her life, and there are questions of madness, and there are questions of the demonic. It's a great atmospheric historical fiction. Like, you get a really strong sense of the Fens, and I love that about this book. And I also love the sort of intertext of of the medieval texts and the questions about what different symbols mean in medieval art. And yeah, this one is winner winner chicken dinner. It's so good. And then the sort of the most grisly is the wrong word, but potentially most graphic of the historical novels is called The Pleasures of Men by Kate Wilson. She's actually a renowned historian, and she sets this in 1940s London. So we're about 40 years before the Jack the Ripper stuff, and it's in that same quadrant, the sort of East End of London. And you get this a murderer dubbed the Man of Crows, and he's killing women in the the area that people who know a bit about the Ripper narratives will realize are echoing that bit. And again, I think she does a great job of atmosphere, getting a sense of what London was like, that part of London was like in the 1960s. And yeah, I read it really quickly. I was really gripped. But it's a little graphic. So I think if you're a bit squeamish, I'd stay away from that. If you want just sort of the evocativeness of suspense, go with Wakenhyrst and Doll Factory. If you don't mind a little bit of graphicness, then Pleasures of Men is very much a pleasure to read. If you're like me and you enjoy the Muse slightly more than the Miniaturist, you might be interested in what I'm calling atmospheric as opposed to gothic historical fiction pieces. I adore Michelle Roberts, and her novel, The Walworth Beauty, is well worth a read. Again, we have two time periods, and we're in the same part of London, but our protagonist for one half is in 2011, and she is in her 50s, 60s, an older academic, sort of retiring, and then the other narrative is 1851, and we get what's his name? Joseph Benson, who's been employed by Henry Mayhew. Now, Henry Mayhew is a historical figure who did conducted research on that time about class. You can actually find the books by Henry Mayhew, and I've actually heard Michelle Roberts talking about how coming across his book on like morality was one of the inspiring motives for this particular book. I think she does a great job of evoking London as a place with historical layers, that you can be in any one place and so many things could have happened there 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 150 years ago. And I think especially for people who don't come from London, like when I first came from North America, you're really struck by the sense of history in any one place. You know, people joke that there are tortoises in Britain that are older than, the nation of the United States. And, that's, somewhat true. It's only a couple hundred years old. So the old buildings in the US are like, oh, it's 100 years old. Whereas here it's like, it's 700 years old. And I feel like that layering of history and reality and knowledge comes to the fore in this one. And I love it. Please read it. And when you read it, tell me about it so I have somebody to talk to it about. I also tend to recommend this book for people who like Sarah Waters. Not Tipping the Velvet, but Fingersmith. If you liked Fingersmith, you'd probably be interested in this. So if you're a Sarah Waters fan, go for that one. Another one by Michelle Roberts is Daughters of the House. Now, this one was actually shortlisted for the Booker. It was published in 1997. The central relationship is two women who are cousins, and it's set in an old home in Normandy. And they essentially are reflecting on the Second World War and being children during the Second World War and really only knowing of it as the war, and adults talking about before the war and after the war, and really a sort of child's experience of and the relationship that happens between the women when they were younger and now. Really, really fascinating. I love this one. I think it's a fairly quick read. It's a little bit slim, but love it. In fact, each chapter is organized by an object in the house, and we sort of go back and forth from the present and their childhood growing up, and it's so well done. You have to read it. And last but not least, I want to recommend Nicola Upson's Stanley and Elsie. It's focused on the artist Stanley Spencer, specifically his time in the Hampshire village working on a commission. And so he depicts images of World War One. So and it's sort of created in this art. It's really well done, and I would argue that Nicola Upson does an incredible job of evoking the visual nature of art and what art can do, and but really interesting to put these characters in context. And I think so each character in this book is a historical figure, whereas some of the others are made up. And I think that's really fun to see what Nicola Upson is able to accomplish with biography, what's known, and then how she can sort of fill in those relationships. So those are my sort of top recommendations for historical fiction, and I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're healthy and managing to ward off the tedium that has been locked down, and I just wish you all the best. Thanks. Bye.